Pierce never believed a single smile could upend his life, until Reed's did. It started on a Monday, the kind of day that made you question whether the universe had it out for you. The rain was relentless. The city smelled like wet concrete and burnt coffee, and Pierce was already 2 hours late for his marketing internship, the one he had begged his way into after being rejected from 5 others. He sprinted into the office lobby, soaked to the bone, hair dripping down his collar. His sneakers squeaked with every step as he tried to slip unnoticed to his desk. But fate, as usual, had other plans. "You're flooding the carpet?" a voice said behind him, calm but edged with amusement. Pierce froze. He turned slowly to see a man leaning against the wall near the elevators. Reed, the new creative lead. He had a cup of black coffee in one hand and an expression that somehow managed to be both judgmental and devastatingly composed. Pierce tried to muster a grin. "Guess I'm just bringing some atmosphere to the office." Reed didn't laugh. He tilted his head, assessing. Or maybe just poor time management. It was the kind of offhand comment that should have rolled right off Pierce's back. But it didn't. Maybe it was the way Reed said it, calm and self-assured, like he'd already figured Pierce out, like he was better. From that moment, Pierce decided he didn't like him. The next few weeks only confirmed it. Reed was everywhere, always 2 steps ahead, always right. He had this irritating habit of giving feedback in a tone so even it sounded condescending. When Pierce stayed late to finish a presentation, Reed would appear out of nowhere with a quiet, "You're missing the emotional through line," and walk off before Pierce could ask what the hell that even meant. Pierce called him Robot Reed behind his back. Felt satisfying, even childish. But under all that irritation, something else simmered. Something Pierce didn't have a name for yet. The turning point came on a Thursday night when the office was nearly empty. Pierce had volunteered to fix a last-minute ad deck, mostly because he wanted to prove Reed wrong. He was slouched over his laptop when the elevator dinged and Reed walked in, carrying a bag of takeout and 2 coffees. "I figured you'd still be here," Reed said simply, setting 1 coffee beside him. Pierce blinked. "You stalking my work hours now? Hard to stalk someone who's always making noise," Reed replied, unfazed. Then, after a pause, "You skipped lunch. I could hear your stomach from across the room." Pierce frowned, but his stomach betrayed him with a low growl. Reed smiled. A small, unguarded thing that threw Pierce off completely. It wasn't the usual cool smirk or polite professionalism. It was warm, real. And for some inexplicable reason, it made Pierce's chest tighten. They ate in silence for a while, the hum of computers filling the background. Reed leaned back in his chair, watching the city lights blur through the rain-streaked windows. "You work too hard," Reed said quietly. Pierce snorted. "You saying that like you don't?" Reed shrugged. "I used to think working harder meant being better. But sometimes it just means you're running from something." Pierce looked up, caught off guard by the vulnerability in Reed's tone. For the first time, he saw past the polished exterior, the exhaustion around Reed's eyes, the weight he carried in his stillness. "What are you running from?" Pierce asked before he could stop himself. Reed smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. "I'll tell you when you figure out what you're running toward." Pierce didn't sleep much that night. The next few weeks blurred into something new. The bickering didn't stop, it just changed. Their conversations became a strange dance of challenge and curiosity. Pierce started to notice little things. The way Reed hummed under his breath when he was focused, how his hands trembled slightly when he drank too much coffee, how he always paused before saying something that mattered. Then came the charity campaign. They were assigned to work together, Reed as the creative director, Pierce as the lead intern. The project was a mess from day one. Too little time, too many opinions. Pierce threw himself into it, determined to impress. One night, when everyone else had gone home, they stayed behind to rework the main pitch. The air was thick with tension and half-finished ideas. Pierce slammed his pen down. "You keep rejecting everything I suggest. What do you even want, Reed?" Reed looked up slowly, eyes steady. "Something honest. Something that feels like it means something to you." Pierce threw up his hands. I don't even know what that's supposed to mean. Then find out, Reed said softly. The words hit harder than Pierce expected. He looked at Reed, really looked at him, and something in that gaze made the room feel smaller, quieter. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The storm outside pressed against the windows. Pierce's voice dropped. You're impossible. Reed's lips curved slightly. You're persistent. It's different. And just like that, the air shifted, charged, fragile, dangerous. Pierce took a step closer. He didn't know why, didn't plan it. His pulse was hammering in his ears. Reed didn't back away. For a second, Pierce thought something might happen, something irreversible. But then Reed exhaled shakily, turned away and said, "We should get back to work." The moment dissolved, but its echo stayed. Pierce told himself it was nothing, that his reaction was just confusion or maybe ego. But every time Reed smiled at someone else, his stomach twisted in ways he couldn't explain. It all came to a head 2 weeks later during the campaign's final presentation. Everything that could go wrong did. The visuals glitched, the audio cut out, and the client looked ready to walk out. Pierce felt the panic rising in his throat. But Reed stepped forward, calm as ever. "We don't need the screen," Reed said. "Pierce will take it from here." Pierce's eyes widened. "What?" Reed gave him a look. Steady, grounding. "You've got this." Pierce turned to the clients, hands trembling. He started talking, at first stumbling over his words, then finding his rhythm. He spoke about connection, about humanity, about the power of real stories. And somehow the words felt true, because they were his. When he finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then the clients nodded, impressed. Afterward, in the quiet hallway, Pierce leaned against the wall, heart still racing. Reed approached him, that unreadable expression back in place. "You believed in me when I didn't," Pierce said softly. Reed shrugged. "I just saw what was already there." "Why do you do that?" "Do what?" "Push me. Make me feel like I'm constantly chasing something I can't catch." Reed hesitated. Then he said, almost a whisper, "Because you make me want to stop running." The world tilted. Pierce's breath caught. For the first time he saw it, all the cracks in Reed's armor, the truth hiding underneath. Neither of them said anything else. But that night, as Pierce lay awake, the memory of Reed's smile replayed over and over. Gentle, unguarded, devastating. And Pierce realized, with a mix of fear and clarity, he was falling. The next morning, everything felt heavier. Like the air between them had changed and neither of them knew what to do with it. Reed avoided eye contact during the debrief meeting, his usual calmness now replaced by a quiet tension. Pierce tried to act normal, but every time their shoulders brushed, he felt that same spark, the one he'd been trying to ignore since the night of the storm. He told himself it didn't mean anything, couldn't. But denial has an expiration date. 2 nights later, Pierce was leaving the office late when he saw the lights still on in the conference room. Reed was there, sitting alone at the table, head bowed over his hands. The usually composed man looked lost. Pierce hesitated, then knocked softly. "You're still here." Reed didn't look up. "Couldn't sleep. Figured I'd work instead." "That's a terrible coping mechanism," Pierce said, forcing a small smile. Reed huffed out a quiet laugh. "You'd know, huh?" Pierce stepped inside. The city lights bled through the glass walls, painting Reed's face in streaks of blue and gold. He looked fragile in a way Pierce had never seen before. "You okay?" Pierce asked. Reed was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "My dad called today. First time in years. He found out about me." Pierce's chest tightened. "About you being—" "Yeah," Reed interrupted, a bitter edge in his tone. "Apparently that makes me a disappointment." Again, the words hung heavy between them. Pierce didn't know what to say, so he didn't. He just walked closer until he was standing right beside him. Reed's shoulders trembled slightly, and before Pierce could think twice, he reached out, placing a hand gently on Reed's back. It was a simple touch, but it made Reed exhale like he'd been holding his breath for days. "Hey," Pierce said softly. "You're not a disappointment. Not to me." Reed looked up, and for a moment, every mask he'd ever worn fell away. The vulnerability there, it was raw, almost painful to see. Something shifted again. Reed's gaze flicked down to Pierce's lips, then back up to his eyes. Time seemed to slow. Pierce's heart pounded so hard he thought it might break his ribs. He didn't know who moved first. Maybe it was both of them. But suddenly, Reed's hand was at the back of his neck, and their mouths met. The kiss wasn't soft. It was desperate, like two people finally giving in to something they'd been fighting for far too long. Pierce felt the world tilt beneath him. All the noise, all the tension, all the confusion. It disappeared. For once, everything made sense. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Reed whispered, "We shouldn't have done that." "Then why did it feel right?" Pierce asked, voice shaking. Reed didn't answer. He just stepped back, walls slamming up again. Because sometimes the right things hurt the most. Then he left. For days after, they barely spoke. Work went on as usual, but every meeting felt like walking through static. Reed was distant, cold, even, and Pierce didn't know how to reach him. It would have been easier to hate him again, but he couldn't. Not after that night. Not after feeling what was real beneath all Reed's control. The breaking point came a week later. They were assigned to present at a youth mentorship event, a project Reed had pitched months ago. Backstage, the tension between them was unbearable. Pierce finally snapped. "Are you going to keep pretending that didn't happen?" Reed's expression didn't change. "It was a mistake. A mistake." Pierce stepped closer. "You kissed me, Reed. You don't get to call it a mistake just because it scares you." Reed's jaw clenched. "You don't understand. You don't know what I've lost just trying to be who I am." "Then stop losing more by running from what you want," Pierce shot back. Reed's eyes flickered, just for a second, before someone called their names from the stage. They had no choice but to go out there. The event was meant to be about storytelling, how personal narratives shape creativity. Reed started strong, professional as ever, but when it came time for Pierce to speak, he went off script. "I was supposed to talk about authenticity," Pierce said, looking out at the crowd. "But the truth is, I haven't always been honest with myself. Sometimes we hide behind ambition, or sarcasm, or fear. And sometimes, it takes one person to make us see who we really are." He looked straight at Reed. Reed froze. Pierce's voice softened. "Being real doesn't mean being fearless. It just means being brave enough to feel." The audience applauded. But for Pierce, there was only one person in the room who mattered, and Reed was staring at him like he didn't know whether to run or stay. When the event ended, Reed disappeared. Pierce searched the building, panic rising, until he finally found him outside, standing in the rain. "You always find dramatic whether to avoid talking to me," Pierce said, breathless. Reed gave a small, broken laugh. "You really shouldn't make me feel like this, Pierce." "Like what?" "Like I could have something real again." Pierce stepped forward, rain soaking through his clothes. "Maybe you can." Reed shook his head. "I'm not good at this." "Us." Pierce's voice was barely a whisper. "Then let me be." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, Reed reached out, his hand trembling as it found Pierce's. And this time, he didn't let go. The city blurred around them, thunder echoing somewhere distant. But all Pierce could see was the way Reed's eyes softened when he finally stopped fighting. No more walls. No more hiding. Just two people standing in the rain, choosing not to run anymore. Pierce smiled through the downpour. "So, are we still pretending we hate each other?" Reed huffed out a quiet laugh, the sound cracking with relief. "Maybe just a little. Keeps things interesting." Pierce squeezed his hand. "Yeah, but next time, if you're going to annoy me, at least do it with that smile." And for the first time in a long while, Reed smiled without hesitation. Bright, unguarded, and completely real. It was the same smile that had made Pierce's heart stumble the first time. Only now it didn't feel like a mistake. Felt like home. For a few weeks, things between them felt almost normal, if normal meant constantly pretending they weren't falling deeper. They still argued, still challenged each other in meetings, still exchanged sarcastic remarks that made their coworkers roll their eyes. But beneath all of it, there was a quiet tenderness now, a current neither of them could deny. They'd stay late after work, sharing dinner on the office balcony, trading stories about their pasts under the glow of city lights. Pierce learned that Reed loved astronomy, that he used to sneak out as a kid just to watch meteor showers from the roof. Reed learned that Pierce had once wanted to be a filmmaker before life pushed him toward marketing instead. The more they shared, the more the space between them disappeared. But love rarely arrives without a test. It began the night the regional director from New York visited. She was sharp, ambitious, and she took an immediate liking to Reed's work. After their presentation, she pulled him aside, her tone low and enticing. "We're opening a new creative branch in Manhattan. I want you to lead it," she said. "It's everything you've been working toward." Pierce overheard part of the conversation from the hallway. He froze, coffee cup in hand, as Reed's polite gratitude turned into stunned silence. New York. A world away. That night, Reed told him about it. They were sitting on the rooftop, the city humming quietly below them. "It's a big opportunity," Reed said. "I'd be insane not to consider it." Pierce tried to smile, but it felt like trying to hold back a storm with bare hands. "So you're leaving?" "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." Reed's eyes softened. "Pierce, I don't even know what this is between us. You and I." "Don't do that," Pierce interrupted, voice rising. "Don't act like what we have is undefined. You know exactly what it is." Reed looked away. "I can't build my life around something that might not last. And I can't keep falling for someone who's already planning their escape," Pierce said quietly. The silence that followed was deafening. When Reed finally left that night, Pierce stayed on the rooftop until dawn, watching the sky shift from black to gray to gold. He felt hollow, like something inside him had been quietly stolen. Days passed. Reed threw himself into work again, pretending nothing was wrong. Pierce tried to do the same, but everything reminded him of what they weren't saying. The late-night laughter, the rain-soaked confessions, the touch of a hand that had once felt like promise. Then came Friday. The company hosted a farewell dinner for the visiting director. Reed sat across from Pierce at the long table, their eyes meeting only once, briefly, painfully. Halfway through the night, Pierce excused himself, stepping outside into the cold. The city was buzzing, but he couldn't feel any of it. He didn't expect Reed to follow. "You left before dessert," Reed said quietly, hands shoved into his coat pockets. Pierce let out a dry laugh. "Didn't realize you cared about dessert." "I care," Reed said, his tone too soft to be casual. Pierce turned to face him. "Then what are you doing, Reed? Why are you acting like this doesn't matter?" Reed hesitated. The streetlight painted half his face in gold, the other in shadow. "Because if I let myself care too much, I'll never go." Pierce stepped closer. "Maybe that's the point." Reed's voice broke slightly. "I've spent years trying to be the kind of person who doesn't need anyone, who doesn't get hurt again. And has that made you happy?" Reed didn't answer. His silence was enough. Pierce exhaled, tired, raw. "You don't have to stay for me, but at least be honest with yourself if not with me." Then he walked away before Reed could see the tears that threatened to fall. Reed left 2 weeks later. No goodbye, no message, just a note left on Pierce's desk. "Thank you for reminding me what it feels like to feel. R." Pierce read it 100 times. Then he folded it once, tucked it into his wallet, and pretended it didn't exist. Months went by. The office felt emptier, quieter. Pierce buried himself in projects, earned a promotion, learned how to smile without meaning it. But some nights, when the rain hit his window just right, he still heard Reed's laugh in the back of his mind. It was almost a year later when fate decided to interfere again. Pierce was presenting at a marketing conference in Chicago, standing under bright lights mid-sentence, when he saw him. Reed. Sitting in the audience, older somehow, eyes still the same soft storm. Pierce's voice faltered for half a beat, but he forced himself to finish the talk. The applause came, the room emptied, and before he could run, Reed was standing in front of him. "You were good up there," Reed said, a small smile playing on his lips. Pierce's heart did something it hadn't done in months. It stumbled. "What are you doing here?" "I moved back. The New York branch didn't feel right." "Didn't feel right?" Pierce repeated, trying to keep his tone neutral. "You mean, after leaving without saying goodbye?" Reed's eyes dropped. "I know. I was a coward." "Yeah," Pierce said quietly. "You were." Reed nodded. "I thought leaving would make it easier to forget. But it didn't. You were still there. In every campaign I designed, every meeting I led, every city skyline I looked at." Pierce swallowed hard. "Reed." Reed took a small step closer. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know that I'm done running." The sincerity in his voice was enough to crack something open inside Pierce that he thought had long healed. "Do you still have it?" Reed asked after a pause. Pierce frowned. "Have what?" "The note I left you." Pierce's hand instinctively went to his pocket. The paper was still there, worn and creased. He didn't answer, he didn't need to. Reed smiled faintly. Then maybe it meant something after all. Pierce's chest tightened. "You broke my heart, Reed." "I know," Reed said softly. "But I think it's still yours if you want it." There it was, the same quiet honesty that had undone Pierce the first time they met. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them buzzed with everything unsaid. Finally, Pierce sighed. "You're still annoying, you know that?" Reed's grin widened, that familiar spark returning. "Yeah, but maybe now you know why." Pierce shook his head, laughing despite himself. "God, I hate that you can still make me feel like this." Reed's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then don't fight it this time." Pierce looked up, meeting those eyes that once made him stumble, and suddenly it didn't feel like falling anymore. It felt like coming home. That night, they walked through the quiet Chicago streets, talking about everything and nothing. The world felt lighter, simpler. When Reed reached for his hand, Pierce didn't hesitate. The city lights shimmered around them, reflections dancing in the puddles at their feet. Pierce glanced sideways, smiling softly. "You know," he said, "I really did think you were just annoying." Reed chuckled. "And now," Pierce's smile turned tender. "Now I know better." And as Reed's fingers tightened around his, that smile, the one that had started it all, returned. Only this time, Pierce didn't stumble. He stepped forward.